Hello Internet, welcome to the Troyan YouTube channel. Today is a very special video. Looking to do more than just reactions on this channel. Looking to expand into other subjects other than music. Like I mentioned in other videos, hoping to do a talk show and some video essays. But I figured it'd be really fun to start off, as people are getting to know more of my music tastes and my background, to talk about some of my favorite artists. So I wanted to do a video just going through my top 10 favorite bands and artists, and I realized there are just so many bands and artists that I love, and that there were some honorable mentions I really wanted to give a shout out to. And the thing is, as I'm sure you all know, your top 10 changes with time. Bands that were in your top 10 in high school might not be in your top 10 when you're an adult, but you still love those bands and you still listen to those bands. And so I wanted to give due respect for a lot of bands that are just outside the top 10 or were in my top 10 at some point. I thought it'd just be a cool way to give a shout out to those different artists. And it's mostly classic rock bands. That's my bread and butter, my preferred taste. But there's some other stuff too that I like a lot. And so when I was coming up with my list of honorable mentions, I also came up with a lot of composers that I'm a big fan of. And a lot of these composers necessarily aren't close to the top 10, but I still felt like giving them a shout out. So I'm sort of going into two categories with these honorable mentions. First will be some composers I like a lot and respect a lot, with a couple that are close to the top 10, but there were just so many composers that I wanted to give a shout out to, I decided to give them their own category. And then the second category will be more bands and artists that were, in my top 10 at one point, or just shy of being in the top 10, but bands I consistently love and come back to. So we're going to start with the first honorable mention in the composer category. Got Stephen Sondheim, legend of musical theater. Honestly, he's here pretty much solely for the Sweeney Todd score, and it's one of my favorite stage musicals ever. Just really, really brilliant. Every song is excellent. Great use of leitmotif. Just phenomenal composition. Obviously known for Send in the Clowns and Into the Woods. Just so many great classics in musical theater. Also West Side Story he did the lyrics for. Just legendary composer. But mainly here because I just love Sweeney Todd that much. This is a guy a lot of you probably aren't familiar with. This is David Wise. He is best known for video game soundtracks, in particular the Donkey Kong Country 1 and 2 soundtrack. I've just really impressed with his work. Just phenomenal composer. He's one of the few ambient composers I really enjoy the work of. So it's less melodic, but it's still very catchy. And what he did in terms of the technology he had available at the time was really brilliant. So just great composer, very clever guy. I would compare him to like, Genesis meets Journey, but for the Super Nintendo, but with sort of the highest sound quality you could get. So just really phenomenal composer. Lots of respect for that guy. This gentleman here is Bruce Falconer. He is, I would best describe his style as ambient rock. He is best known for composing the soundtrack for the American version of Dragon Ball Z. And just very cool, lots of synthesizers, electric guitar, just a really cool score. Very different than the Japanese score, which was orchestral in nature. And there are a lot of people who don't like his score, but then there are a lot of people who think his score is brilliant. I really like his work, and I really think that he came up with some genius songs for the Dragon Ball Z North American version. Bill Conti, mainly here because of my love of the Rocky films and his score in the majority of those. Just the brilliance and themes, obviously Gonna Fly Now, but some of the more somber stuff like Mickey's theme, the more action-oriented songs like Conquest. They're just a really brilliant composer. Just absolute genius. Scored many films, but mainly for my love of the Rocky scores. And speaking of the Rocky scores, we've got Vince Nicola, all around phenomenal musician, kind of more of a progressive rock kind of guy. He's very similar in style to Bruce Falconer, who I mentioned earlier. Very synthesizer heavy, electric guitar, less orchestral. Did the Rocky IV soundtrack and the Transformers soundtrack, both of which are excellent. And so he's, if you know Vince Nicola, that's kind of what Bruce Falconer is like. So sort of similar vein, but just, once again, very, very cool composer. Here we've got Masashihamauzu, really, really excellent composer. Best known for his work in the Final Fantasy series. Very, very jazzy, uses bright, sprightly piano, just excellent orchestration. He's sort of a more divisive composer in the series, but I really, love his work. Just super catchy. I love his really unique take on instrumentation, like combining violins with more electronic drums and heavy metal guitars. He's really good at crossing genres that people don't expect to be crossed, and just does it really well with some really, really great compositions that I'm a big fan of. Next, we've got Yoko Shimomura, very, very talented, one of the best, composers working today. Another video game composer primarily. She's best known for perhaps the Kingdom Hearts series, but also did Final Fantasy 15 and Street Fighter. So just very versatile composer. One of the most technically talented composers I've ever heard in my entire life. Just her music knowledge and theory skills are kind of off the charts. Just a monster composer, and really good at a bunch of different things, from grand and epic to fun, but yeah, just all-around great composer. Danny Elfman, mainly here for his work on Batman and Batman Returns, two of my favorite film scores of all time, but also did the theme song for The Simpsons, and scored basically every Tim Burton movie you've ever heard. Once again, really, really brilliant composer, and I'm a big fan of his scores on those first two Burton Batmans, and just two of the best film scores of all time. Here we've got Tsuyoshi Chibatto. He is a beast of a guitar player, phenomenal guitar player, but also just a really, really excellent composer. Composed one of my favorite video game soundtracks of all time, a game called Brave Fencer Musashi. Just really, really brilliant score, like top to bottom, and a score that works really well as a cohesive piece. The pieces, the leitmotifs build on each other in really brilliant ways throughout. And he has a very distinct style, where there have been a couple other video games where I've heard like a track or two of his, and thought, oh, that sounds like Tsuyoshi, and then when looking at the credits later, found out that those were tracks composed specifically by him to help the composer fill out some gaps. Really great guitar player. Had a couple conversations with him. Nice guy. So he's got the rock street cred, but also just a really, really great composer. Kind of best known to people actually for his rock music and not his video game composing, where he was in a band called the Black Mages, and so he's probably best known for that. Which is a good band, but I best appreciate him as a composer for his work in video games. And here we have the only of these composers that was close to my top 10. We've got Yasunori Mitsuda. For anyone who saw that Chrono Cross reaction video, that's the guy who composed it. Really, really great composer, very distinct style. He is just considered one of the greats in terms of video game composition. I love his work, and I seek out his work from video games I haven't even played, just because I'm that big a fan of his music. All around really great musician, and a very passionate guy who fought tooth and nail to get into the industry. If you ever get the time, look into his story. It's really inspiring. His is really a tale of perseverance, never giving up. And the first soundtrack he did, you can hear his heart and soul and passion really put into the material. So yeah, Yasunori Mitsuda, just all around great composer. And like I said, he was sort of the only one of these composers that was near my top 10, and the rest of these that I'm going through are going to be probably artists you're more familiar with, and they're all people who were either in my top 10 at some point in my life or very close. So Poison for me was a top 10 band in high school. My first concert was seeing Poison with ZO2 and Kiss. Great band. I like even the albums without CC. So the albums with Blues and Richie Kotzen. I think those are great albums. I don't listen to them as much anymore, but I listen to them a lot in the day. Have intimate familiarity with the catalog whenever I put on a song of theirs, I'm super into it. So Poison, great band, not quite in my top 10 anymore, but certainly an honorable mention, worthy of a tip in the hat too. Bruce Springsteen, I feel like everyone knows Bruce. One of the all-time great rock artists. Great singer, great guitar player, great frontman. Amazing songwriter. I've really started to heavily get into Bruce very recently. Binging the entire catalog and doing deep dives, listening to his audiobook, watching that new Western Stars movie. I've always liked Springsteen, but he's an artist that continues to grow on me and really resonate with me. I love his ethos, his lyrics. Yeah, he's one of the all-time greats, and you basically, very close to the top 10, and depending on the day of the week, might be in the top 10, but just isn't in the current top 10. The current top 10 is just how I'm feeling at this time in 2020. If I did a top 10 a year from now, it might be a different top 10. The Doors, once again, another band I really got into in high school. I had a good friend who was in a Doors tribute band, and I would have liked the Doors a lot anyway, but that gave me that just an extra connection to the group. But great catalog, even the albums without Morrison. Ray Manzarek also has a really great solo album. They're just a really talented unit. You've got just amazing jazzy drums that are kind of heavy. You've got great guitar playing. Ray Manzarek, one of the great rock keyboardists ever. Jim Morrison in some ways is the weak link of the band in that he's not offering that much technical skill necessarily. He's more of like a Sinatra-esque crooner in this rock band. But I think all of them together created something really distinct and different. And I think Morrison, had the great poetry and the amazing stage presence to make up for any lack of musical virtuosity, which you don't necessarily need. But brilliant band, brilliant catalog. At one time in the top 10. So, and a lot of these hurt to not be in the top 10 because these bands are so great. But, that's just where you are at different points in your life. Alright, so this is probably a band that most of you haven't heard of. This is a band called Crash Diet. They're sort of best known for being the first hair metal band to get a deal since the grunge revolution. Around 2005, they got a record deal to Universal Records in Sweden, and it was a big deal because whoa, a hair metal band got signed. A really great band, rich history. They have a trouble keeping lead singers where the first 3 albums, there's a different singer on each of those albums, and now they're on to their 4th lead singer. The original lead singer, Dave Leppard, the band was his brainchild. He wrote the songs, he came up with the vision of the band, and tragically, depression led him to suicide. And so they've been sort of trying to continue his legacy ever since. And the different singers each bring a unique, great flair to the band, but a really awesome band. And a band that inspired a whole bunch of other bands to pick up guitars and play, because at the time they came out, a lot of people had sort of given up on glam and hair metal and stuff, and they inspired an entire new generation to pick up the torch and keep it going. And that first Crash Diet album is just one of the best albums ever. So even though there's a lot of their stuff I'm maybe not as into, there's a lot of great material in there, and I feel like their influence and how inspiring they are, and how great that first album is, gives them an honorable mention spot. Megadeth, Dave Mustaine, thrash metal legend. I had the honor of opening up for Dave Ellefson last year, which was really super cool. But Megadeth, just one of the all-time thrash greats, probably my favorite quote-unquote thrash metal band. I'm typically not as into the genre, but I think Dave's I think the fact that Dave is a little bit goofy helps the band for me. And I like how he kind of has a glammy voice, and there's a lot of glam affectations to Megadeth. They're glammier than the other, big 4 thrash, and I think that's part of the appeal for me. So I don't take them completely seriously. I have fun with them, but it's, they just have such a great catalog, so many great songs, so big Megadeth fan, what can you say? They're awesome. And this is sort of, a cheat, but, it's a cheat for the honorable mentions. Black Sabbath. And I have pictures of both the Ozzy era and the Dio era because both those eras are amazing. And I'm sort of lumping in Ozzy solo and Dio solo into my discussion on Black Sabbath honorable mentions. Truthfully, if I have to rank them, it's probably Ozzy solo, Dio, Black Sabbath, Ozzy Sabbath in terms of how I prefer them. Great catalogs, all around. I mean, Ozzy, so many great guitar players like Jakey Lee, Randy Rhoads, obviously, and Dio. I mean, his first couple albums are just, absolute masterpieces. And of course, Black Sabbath. I mean, the self-titled debut in Heaven and Hell. So many great albums, in this collective catalog. Ronnie James Dio, one of the great rock singers. These guys are all legends. Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, Bill Ward. So many great legends in the Black Sabbath camp. The album they did with Ian Gillan was great. So just the entire extended Black Sabbath family gets, an honorable mention for me. Just so much great material from, all the different directions. Van Halen. Dave Lee Roth, the greatest frontman in the history of rock music. Sammy Hagar, also amazing. Gary Sharon, Without You was a fine single. So many great albums, so influential, so many great songs. Eddie Van Halen, guitar god for a reason. Michael Anthony, just a really excellent foundation to the group with those backing vocals. People say the most predictable rhythm section in rock. That's kind of fair. But you know what? It's a damn good rhythm section. The songs are great, the performances are great, and I love the different layers of the band. I love the Roth Party era, and I love sort of the deeper stuff they got into with Sammy. They're two different bands, but they're two great bands, and they definitely deserve an honorable mention. Smashing Pumpkins. This is a band that I've been mainly digging through their catalog through doing my podcast, The Lipstick Panel, and their first album of theirs I actually don't like at all. I think it's a pretty boring. But after that, they've been pretty consistently great. Just a really excellent band with a lot of layers, depth, and nuance. If it was all Bullet with Butterfly Wings, I would not like this band. I don't actually like Bullet with Butterfly Wings. I kind of hate that song. But they just have such a great wealth of excellent material, outside of that song. And lots of different layers, orchestration, and they're not all angst. There's a lot of happy, optimistic songs, pining songs. It's not all just, I'm angry. If it was that, I wouldn't be interested. But just a really, really great catalog. Billy Corgan is a, great songwriter, great band leader. His voice, takes some getting used to, but, I mean, honestly, he's pretty consistently made great albums over the course of their career. And so, they're, a band I initially wrote off and was completely wrong about. So Smashing Pumpkins, great band. Michael Stanley Band, you've probably only ever heard of them if you live in Cleveland or have lived in Cleveland. Basically, take Bob Seger and Bruce Springsteen, but make them from Cleveland, and that's what this is. It's heartland rock, it's blue collar, it's songs about working hard and loving your girl. Really, really great band, and what I love about this group is that they have different lead singers. Michael Stanley is a great band leader and has a great lower baritone voice, but he's had other great singers in the band, like guitar player Jonah Coslin, and keyboardist Kevin Raleigh, who get to contribute their own songwriting and unique personalities to the band, and just great catalog full of blue-collar, working-class rock. It's awesome. Michael Jackson, one of the all-time greats, amazing catalog. Love his stuff with, Jackson 5, love his solo stuff. I mean, Thriller, bad. So many great songs. One of the few artists I liked as a kid. All-around phenomenal. Great singer, great performer, great songwriter, one of the all-time greats, all-around excellent. Prince, sort of the other side of the coin with Michael Jackson, where I think Michael Jackson has better songs and more visceral songs, but Prince is really interesting as an artist, probably much more talented in terms of his virtuosity with different instruments, and I think he's more creative than Michael Jackson. And so I think the best of Michael Jackson is better than Prince's best of the best. But I think that Prince is more interesting to sit down and think about and dissect. And he just has such a wealth of music, of different styles, different genres, and he kind of excels at all of them. And he wasn't afraid to get weird with it. And I think he's just a really brave artist that is just worthy of a lot of respect, like an absolute musical genius. Just all around great stuff. Warrant, The Down Boys. For people who have watched other videos on this channel, they'll know that one of the guitar players from Warrant ended up playing in my band for a little bit, helped produce the first album, played guitar on it, played a little guitar on the second album, still a close friend. And Janie actually loaned us his acoustic guitar for one of the songs on the first album to help us record it because we needed an acoustic for a certain song, so Janie loaned us his. So I've got a lot of sentimental affection for the Warrant camp, but sincerely, great songs, great tunes. Janie, I think, is one of the most underrated songwriters in rock. I think he's, up there with the greats. I think he has a very Phil Lynott quality to his songwriting. Great storyteller, in terms of lyrics, great singer. All around, just great group with a great catalog. And even their 90s stuff, which gets completely written off, I think is really cool. There's some just really excellent cuts in their catalog through the different eras. I kind of fell off with them once Robert Mason became the singer, because I felt I didn't feel like he was the right pick in terms of a songwriter for the group and what they've been producing since. But I love that album they did with Jamie St. James. So Warrant, I think, is a really underrated band, much more than Cherry Pie. I think, it's a bit of a bummer that song is their legacy because there's just so much depth and nuance to the group. And they were definitely one of the more clever hair bands. So, a bit of a bummer for that, but great, great, great band. Love them. Michael Bolton. Yeah, I know, that's going to be shocking for some folks on this channel, but yeah. Michael Bolton is legitimately one of my favorite artists. I started off as a kid, in the Mike Judge generation where you just see Office Space and you're like, oh man, Michael Bolton sucks because a guy in a movie said so. But I always liked the Kiss song Forever and thought it was great and knew it was a Michael Bolton co-write. It's like, well, fine, he wrote that one cool song, but otherwise he still sucks. And then I listened to his work with Blackjack, which is a hard rock band he was with where Bruce Kulick from Kiss was the guitar player. I'm like, alright, well, Blackjack is cool, and so is Forever, but the rest of his stuff sucks. And then I listened to his early solo stuff, which was kind of like hard rock, hair metal, like, okay, well, this is cool, but his mainstream stuff sucks. And then I listened to his mainstream stuff, like, you know what, actually, this is pretty good. So yeah, Michael Bolton is just a really great artist. He's a great guitar player. I know you don't believe me, but he's a great guitar player. He's a great singer. He's a great songwriter. And I respect his career path because, he went with what worked. He tried rock for like a good, 12 years. Wasn't really working. Then did an album of half rockers, half ballads, and then the ballads were the hits. And then he just kept rolling with it. Good for him. And, he likes soul. He likes R&B. And he always incorporated some of that into his rock stuff. So he just allowed a different part of his personality to shine creatively, and that made him money. Good for him. He's a great performer, he's a great singer, and he has a great catalog. I really respect Michael Bolton, so I know a lot of you are going to be rolling your eyes at this, but yeah, I'm into Michael Bolton. T-Rex. So often in my top 10. So often there. Phenomenal band. Marc Bolan, one of my big musical inspirations. I wear top hats because of this dude. Single-handedly invented glam rock. Great boogie to their songs, great spacey lyrics, incredible vocal stylings of Marc Bolan. One of the all-time greats. A bit of a bummer they're remembered as a one-hit wonder in America. And I'll be completely honest, a lot of their catalog is pretty samey, and it's kind of like AC/DC, where if you've heard one of their songs, you've pretty much heard the catalog. But man, it's great, and there is a bit more nuance than that. I was being a little bit reductivist in that, but T-Rex, great band, one of my all-time favorites. Hurts that they're not in the top 10 on this day, but that's just how it is. Styx. Styx, it hurts not having you in the top 10, because you're so good. Amazing band. My favorite member of Styx is actually Lawrence Gowan, the replacement for Dennis DeYoung. He has a really great solo career. Kind of a, Canadian progressive rock artist. Really, really cool. But I love Dennis DeYoung. I love Tommy Shaw. Great band, great catalog. Great adjacent catalogs, like the Damn Yankees catalog. And I think Ricky Phillips was in Bad English. So also, great adjacent catalog. Just really great band. So many great songs, and so many great songs to their adjacent spinoffs. Truthfully, I probably like Lawrence Gowan's solo a little bit more than Styx, but it's all great. Just so much great material. Sort of my connection to Styx is that they played with Cleveland's Contemporary Youth Orchestra 1 year before I joined, and it's what inspired me to join that orchestra, where I saw that show, and I thought, that's really cool. I want to join this orchestra, and then I did. And it was a really, great musical honor, and I have Styx to thank for that, and so they're sort of an extended part of my orchestra family, and I'll always have a lot of affection for them. All right, and this one hurts. Yeah, this is rough, but Pink Floyd was actually in the top 10 before I made this video, and then I looked at the honorable mentions, and one of the honorable mentions, I'm like, you know what? You're actually in the top 10. And so Pink Floyd got bumped down. And so when I got this photo, this was to be for Pink Floyd in my top 10. But they got bumped down by an honorable mention when I was looking at where I felt in my soul that day. Today, on this date in 2020, looking at my entire life of favorite bands, Pink Floyd barely out of the top 10, bumped down by one of the honorable mentions in an upset for me. But yeah, just amazing band. Basically everything from Dark Side of the Moon to the Final Cut is perfection. I'm not as much into stuff before Dark Side, and I'm not as much into stuff after the Final Cut, but that run of albums is perfection. Is so good. Just really great, and it really hurts that Pink Floyd isn't in my top 10 on this date, but that's where I am today. And all these bands, all these honorable mentions that I've gone through, they're all great, they're all amazing. It's just, this is where I'm at this date in 2020, and so if I did this list a year from now, it might be a different list. But yeah, so those are my honorable mentions for bands that didn't make the top 10. So what do you think my top 10 favorite artists are? This has got to be shocking, because there's a couple on there you're like, oh, I'm sure that would be in his top 10. So what does the top 10 look like? I thought it'd be fun to make a little game out of it. So I want you folks to comment below as to what you think my top 10 are, and whoever gets it closest, the three who get it closest will get whatever they want me to reacted to. So that's the game. So the three people who are closest to guessing my top 10 favorite bands, I will go ahead and reach out to you after that video is pulled, and then I will do your picks for reactions. And you could probably find this out if you did some research on the internet. I'm sure there are some interviews somewhere, and if you listen to my podcast or just dig through the channel enough, you might be able to guess and figure out that information. But you know what? Whatever, that's just how it rolls. I don't care about cheating and spoilers. I don't really consider that cheating. Whatever, if you just happen to figure it out, based upon the data you have available, good for you. But also, Pink Floyd would have been in the top 10 until today, and then I just mixed it up. So, but yeah, for people who want to guess, tell me what you think my top 10 favorite bands are based upon what you know about me, and then next week I'll post a video revealing my top 10 favorite bands. And yeah, let me know what you thought of the honorable mentions. Let me know if you were surprised by some of the honorable mentions, and if you thought that certain artists should have been mentioned. Who do you think that should have been mentioned in the honorable mentions that wasn't? Or will they just be in the top 10? Who knows? You'll just have to tune in next week. But that is the video. Yeah, be sure to do the like and comment and subscribe and all the things. Thank you guys so much for watching, and yeah, look forward to next week. Bye.